video is sponsored by Squarespace. Last night, it snowed, but the ground isn't frozen and I still have bulbs to plant. So today I'm gonna take you along as I plant the last of my bulbs, and I'm gonna teach you some tricks that I've learned over the years to, get these things into the ground. I have crocuses, I have tulips, I have daffodils, I have hyacinths, I have alliums, and more. And I also have multiple ways that I'm gonna be planting these, so make sure to stick around till the end. First, let's talk about location. One of the things that I love the most about bulbs is that you can plant them anywhere, and you really should, because they look great when they come up in the spring, no matter what the location is that you choose. This is a little apple tree that I have planted in the yard, and come the summer, I'm not going to be planting things around it. I don't want this tree to have to compete with, plants for sharing moisture. But I did plant about 30 bulbs around the base. So in the spring, they'll come up, they'll bloom, they'll give a nice little flush of color, they'll die back, and then the tree can really shine. But here in my backyard, the spot I'm the most excited about is this strip along behind me here. I have a whole mix of daffodils and tulips planted in here. They're gonna come up in the spring, they're gonna look really beautiful from everywhere in the yard, and I've done quite a dense planting, so it's gonna do quite a showing. Then they're gonna die back, and then for the summer, I'm probably gonna plant dahlias on top of the bulbs. They'll bloom, they'll do a great showing throughout the summer, and then they'll die back. I'll take them out of the ground, and then it's the turn for the bulbs again. They're gonna come back year after year, but I'm going to be able to share the space. I also love bulbs in a space like this. If you're limited, but you have some grass, planting things like daffodils and crocuses and grape hyacinths, all of these types of bulbs will come up quite early in the spring, bloom, and then you don't really need to be mowing the grass in that early season. By the time you need to do that first mow, because your lawn is getting quite long, the bulbs will have had some time for those leaves to gather energy so that they'll be able to bloom again in the following year. So you can turn this kind of blank slate grass area, and you guys know I don't like grass, you can turn it into a beautiful spring garden. But the absolute best spot to plant bulbs, in my opinion, is somewhere where they're gonna be seen. And that's why today I'm gonna be planting most of my bulbs right up at the front of my house, right where I'm gonna see them the most, where I'm gonna be coming and going. Everyone who stops by is gonna get this great spring showing. Instead of scattering just a few here and there throughout the yard, I'm gonna concentrate them so that it's more impactful. And a quick note on timing. You don't need to be worried about getting these bulbs in a really narrow window of time. I know they start to be available in stores, usually come September in my area. If you can't get around to it, and like me, the snow has fallen and you still have bulbs to plant, get them into the ground. As long as you can work that soil, they'll happily go into the ground. You do not want to be storing them over the winter. They will dry out. They're not going to be happy. They want to be outside. They want to be in the cold. Just put them in. Don't worry. Next up, let's talk tools. I'm going to be doing a large amount of bulbs today, so I'm using larger tools. Probably the way I've planted the most bulbs is just with a shovel. I'm using a large shovel because I'm going to be making a larger hole, so I can put a larger amount of bulbs into it. But even a hand shovel, just open up the ground to the depth that the bulb needs and get them in there, right? Just simple tool that most people are going to have. This is going to work fine. Another tool that you can use, which I do enjoy, especially for when I'm adding them into a garden, where the soil's maybe a little bit softer and I'm spreading them out a little bit more, is a bulb planter. So this one here is a stand-up bulb planter. I bought this because I planted thousands of daffodils. I don't think you need to get the stand-up one. If you want to spend the money, it's nice and ergonomic. It is a great tool, but they do make hand versions of these. And the idea with the bulb planter is you stab it into the ground and you take this puck of soil out, you put the bulb in, and then when you go to make the next hole, that puck of soil pops out the top and you refill in the hole that you made. This is great for especially like in a lawn where you your your soil's pretty established, it will make a nice solid puck and you'll be able to plug it nicely. But don't underestimate the shovel for disturbing like a lawn type space. What I do with the shovel often is I will dig it into the ground, and instead of scooping out an entire shovel's worth, I'll just use it to crack open the soil. I'll open up a slit, drop in some bulbs, and then just step on it, stomp it, use my hand, seal in that cut that I've made, and you really won't see the difference, you know, come spring. Now I need to do some digging. One of the things I love the best about these bulbs is that you can layer them in. You can get a lot of bulbs into a small space because they need different depths. The general rule is the bigger the bulb, the deeper it needs to go. And if you want to know the depths, every single package of bulbs it's gonna have planting instructions, or you can do a really quick Google search to get the specific number. But generally daffodils, you want to put these in first because they need to go 6 or 7 inches deep, and that's pretty deep. That's, you know, depending on what your soil is, it can be challenging to dig down that far. You know, we're talking about, you know, getting into the ground. If you're worried about not being able to get that depth, you're really challenged trying to dig up that soil, just remember, this is gardening. It's not rocket science. Done is better than perfect. If all you can do is get into the ground 5 inches to get your daffodils in, most of them are gonna be fine. And it also is an option, if you can't dig down quite deep, to put soil on top of them. You know, doing a top dressing of composting, even mulching, stuff like that, that's all gonna add to the depth, right? They just wanna be in the ground so that they're insulated from freezing, they're being kept moist, they're being kept cool in the summer, but, you know, don't overthink things. So in this trench, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna fill it up with these daffodils. Now, I'm gonna be putting a lot of bulbs into this space, but in general, you wanna make sure that you're clustering these. Like if you only have a single daffodil that's gonna be coming up and blooming, it's gonna look a little awkward. These are all gonna look a lot better in your garden if they're together. But at the same time, you want to leave a little bit of space between the bulbs. Here's a perfect example of why. These will grow over the years and divide and make multiple bulbs. Think like garlic. Garlic's a perfect bulb to think, right? All those cloves, those all started as a single clove in the ground that turned into a head, and these daffodils are going to do the same thing, leading to more and more flowers in the future. But if they're all super close to each other, they're not going to have space to spread, they're not going to have space to grow. So friendly, but maybe not touching. Friendly, not intimate. That's the spacing we want for these. Okay, we got about 2 small packs or 1 Costco size pack of daffodils into this trench. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take some of these clumps and I'm gonna break the soil off, and I'm gonna cover up the bulbs. You know, the bulbs themselves are about, you know, 1.5 inches, 2 inches tall. So once I can't see the bulbs, now my trench is going to be 5 inches deep, and then it's gonna be time to move on to planting stuff like tulips or the alliums. Now we're gonna repeat that process again with the tulips and the alliums, making sure they're friendly but not intimate for the spacing, and just randomly fill in the trench again. Now with those covered, I have about 3 inches of depth left in my trench, and now it's time to plant my crocuses. And like I said, the smaller the bulb, the deeper they go. You can see how small these little crocus bulbs are. Because these are quite small, rather than spreading them out and filling this whole trench like what I did with the tulips, what I'm gonna do instead is create little clusters, kind of spaced together. Now I'm gonna level off the soil in here and then put down my grass clumps, and then I'll be ready to move on to the next section until all my bulbs are finished. One of the reasons why I like planting my bulbs this way is all of these bulbs are going to bloom at a different time. So even though they're all planted in the same area, it's going to kind of do a staggered display. First the crocuses will come up, then the daffodils will bloom, then the tulips, then the alliums. It makes it so that this area of the garden is going to be looking very pretty, very decorative for up to 2 months. You can use the layering technique on a much smaller scale too. I know I was doing an entire trench there, which is great for an unestablished garden, but here I am in a garden that's already planted. I don't want to dig up every single plant that's already here. I just want to add some spring color. So I'm going to do the same thing, but just in a single hole. I'm going to pop in 2 or 3 daffodils. Same spacing. You know, less of a space to work with. Cover them up. Pop in an allium. And a circle of tulips around it. Cover it up. A little cluster of crocuses for that earliest spring blooms. And then fill the hole in. Still gonna do that staggered display, but I don't have to totally reset the garden. Do you love bulbs, but you don't have a spot for them? Or are you dealing with pest pressure? Something like deer coming in and eating your bulbs before you can get any blooms, or rodents that, you know, those naughty squirrels that come and dig them up and eat them all. Another way to plant them is to put them into a container. I have some bulbs that I'm going to be using specifically for cut flowers. I'm not going to be wanting them to come back year after year. So I don't want to put in the labor and the effort to dig them into the ground because I don't need to. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to fill this up with some compost, put in my bulbs very, very tight, cover it up, and just set it out. They'll overwinter really, really happily, and then come spring, I can place them in whatever empty spot I have, and they'll bloom, and when it's done, I'll empty that compost out, have the empty basket, and be able to do it year after year. I have some leaves in the bottom here to hold my soil in because there's little slits on the bottom, but I'm just gonna get a bit of a layer, maybe a couple inches, so that the roots have somewhere to dig into. And then I have my bulbs and I'm gonna get them into the crate. The difference on this is the spacing's really tight. We needed to give them space before so that they could spread, they could grow, they could get bigger. They could turn from garlic cloves into garlic bulbs over and over again. But these, because we're gonna be digging them out at the end of the year, they don't need the space. So the spacing is usually called egg carton spacing. So very tight, not touching, but you know, not much room to spread out. And because of that, you can get lots and lots and lots into a really tiny, tight space. These crates on the flower farm, this is how we would commonly grow some of the bulbs, and we would get about 60 of the bulbs into it, and these were the largest size, the largest grade. So you can really cram a lot into a really tight space. Once you got that egg carton spacing in, you want to cover them up. I'm going to put the soil up to the very top on these, give them lots to insulate them over the winter, and then I'm going to set them into a corner to forget about until the weather warms up and the snow melts. I know it's a luxury item to have those bulb crates, and they are something that I have only because I'd been doing commercial farming. So they're not going to be a really common tool, but the technique can be used by anyone. It can be as simple as just planting them into a box. It only needs to hold together, you know, enough to hold the soil until the spring. Or if you have patio gardens and you make summer planters, you could fill these now with bulbs, have that same depth, and then come summer, you plant on the top, and then you get 2 2 gardens for one. Spring bulbs are probably one of my favorite things to grow. I am lucky that I am in Canada. It's quite cold here, so they do well, and we're also quite dry in the summers, so they don't rot away very often. So it does make sense to indulge, but there's something about after a cold and gray winter having those first flowers come up when there's nothing else that makes it so, even though the show doesn't last as long as some of the most spectacular summer plants of all, I will always be interested in investing into spring bulbs. And a big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. The truth is, the place that I buy most of my bulbs is online. And you would be so foolish if you had a bulb selling business to not have a website to capture my dollars. And Squarespace is a company that will help you build one of those. Squarespace is an all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything from products to content to time, all in one place, all on your terms. I love how easy they make it for me to build a website. But that's not all. Squarespace payments and invoicing helps me run my business in person too. Domains by Squarespace makes it the first as well as last stop in building my website, and they even have tools to help me sell content or courses, which is really valuable for a creator like me. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/youcan'teatthegrass to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.